Hey, what's up, everybody? Time for another game theory video. If you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. Another one of those videos of are new players better than old players, or are old school players better than new players? And this got brought up because of that video that I was talking about Mike recently, and then some comments. So I thought I'd make a video on it because I actually thought of a different way that I could actually come at this topic and use some different examples, right? So again, Jesus Christ, look at old Clayton. This is old Clayton. 18, maybe I was in that picture. Oh my God. And people forget I was still winning tournaments at that time. So I think, and what I've said before is, I think new school players have no reason to be worse than old school players, if that makes sense. I don't necessarily think that new school players are better than old school players, but I don't think they have an excuse to be bad, so to speak, that they can't really only blame on themselves, so to speak, right? Which, of course, fighting games a competitive endeavor. You know, it is a skill, or they try to take skill out of it. But, and what I mean is, let's look at sick Clayton here. You know what I mean? I'm still fucking sick. Jesus Christ, you know, I've been, who knows? I'm actually got to go to the hospital here in a couple hours again, but let's take an example, use some examples of Sick Clayton and some of the stories that I told just recently while in Japan. Even for me, and this sounds like such a fucking, this makes me sound so old when there's like, you have the example of like, well, back in my day, young whippersnapper kind of thing, right? But it's totally fucking true, dude. Let's think about this. I said that when I was in Japan, while on the train board, you know, again, every time I'm in Japan, I don't care about playing video games. And geez, it's still been months since I've played any video game, even now that I'm back in America. Unless you count that I made those recent footsie videos, so I did put in the game just to record it. But again, I would say that doesn't really count. But besides that, months since I've even played a video game. Let's just think that I was on the train in Japan sometimes, and sometimes I would just use my phone and I would watch a match of Street Fighter Super Turbo, and I watched a couple matches of Street Fighter 6. Think about that for a second. Think back in my day when I was actually going to tournaments and winning these tournaments, dude. Do you realize that when I'm in and out of the hospital talking to my doctors how much longer I'm going to be alive? Do you know how boring it is to be in the hospital? You probably don't, because you've probably never had a real fucking problem like that. You have nothing to fucking do. Not everyone, when I was in the hospital, I don't have a phone like, oh, hey, let me watch a match of Street Fighter. I want you to like really fucking think about that. And then even go back further when I was a kid and I said there's this idea that you were not fucking playing unless you were winning, right? And that's why a lot of times when I compare old school players to new school players, and of course video games do progress, right? There has been a progression of many video games, right? There's more knowledge, you would think, right? I mean, look at those old school strategy guides we showed where, you know, what we would think of as simple combos were considered, whoa, very fucking hard to do, right? Because you didn't actually get a lot of chance to practice these kind of combos because unless you were playing or unless you were winning, you weren't playing. So you had to have solid fundamentals, right? Or at least you would hope solid fundamentals, or maybe you just knew some kind of shenanigan that the other person wasn't ready for because you knew a trick or something, right? Even if you're at the arcade, remember, not everyone had a fucking computer to like watch a fucking video game. Back in the day, Jesus Christ, and this is why I always said that Street Fighter Alpha 2 has this fucking kind of lure and rainbow rose-colored glasses because when the internet started coming, there was some kind of like Google group chat, and it was mainly around the time of Street Fighter Alpha 2. And that's why I always said I thought Street Fighter Alpha 2 killed Street Fighter because no one gave a fuck about Street Fighter Alpha 2. But you know, there was this like small group of players on the internet and they would talk about Street Fighter Alpha 2 on the internet, right? But if you get the perspective, if you really think about what I'm saying is even if you're at the arcade, you can't even fucking watch a match of somebody playing Street Fighter 2 unless you're close to the machine. And you got to remember Street Fighter 2 was so popular. I said as a kid, just when Street Fighter 2 came out, I remember at things like going to like a Sears, or I don't remember if it was a Sears, whatever it was. Maybe it's Sears. I think Sears, right? Maybe it was a JC Penney. I don't fucking remember. But when you're talking about like the mall, there would be lines outside the mall just for a chance to play Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo at like one of those like kiosk kind of things. That's how popular Street Fighter was, right? People would wait in lines just for a chance to play the game. But the point is, you didn't, you weren't fucking even watching, right? So think about that perspective of how lucky people are nowadays in video games. You're like, wow, I can go back and watch a match. I can be imagine Clayton dying in the hospital, right? Again, I'm still probably, who knows how much longer I'm going to be alive at the rate my fucking health is going. It feels like a lot of times, right? Jesus Christ, just in Japan and spent 6 fucking weeks in bed, basically, right? I never even had the opportunity while I was sort of in the scene to actually watch matches like that. Oh, I'm bored in the hospital. Oh, okay. Hey, Clayton, here's your will. Oh, great. Okay. Well, while I'm looking at this, let me like watch a match on my phone. I can't even fucking do that. Do you realize how fucking lucky you are? That's why I say, and I've used that example of the fucking, and again, I don't even know what the fuck it's called. It shows how much I've actually played. It's like a replay feature. I'm sure it's called replay something. I don't know. But whatever the replay feature is, and you can replay over it or something, you can replay your matches on that Guilty Gear Accent Core, whatever it is, right? And I'm like, whoa, imagine having something like this, dude. Imagine having something like this, you know what I mean, back in the day that you can go back. Like, again, and people, my haters, of course, when I looked like that, dude, I was winning tournaments, dude. People thought I was older because, I just looked older when I was younger. Now people think I look younger, although I feel like I'm looking older now, but whatever. Depends on health and if I shave, I guess. But, people don't realize I was winning tournaments before I could even drive, right? And always where I lived, think about, and again, people get mad when I say this, the truth hurts sometimes. I was not someone that was practicing video games like that all the time. I've showed the setups that I've played on, dude. A fucking like 10-inch TV, dude. You know what I mean? Fucking was duct taping my controls. I didn't even have fucking money for video games. When I was making, even if we go farther ahead after I stopped doing tournaments, when I was making all those Marvel fucking videos that no one had ever done before, that fucking like 10 years later, people are still trying to catch up to my Marvel videos, I didn't even have a fucking PS3. I had to borrow one to make those videos, right? Now, I guess you could just say that's skillism, but the point is, you know what I mean? Go back even further to when I'm going to these tournaments. I wasn't fucking playing and practicing video games all day. I have fucking real life problems. Back in the Street Fighter 2 days, like I said, one of my only happy memories is on the weekends, sometimes I would go, my grandma would take me to the arcade and I'd get to play Street Fighter a little bit. And then I would, you'd read a magazine and you would think about it. And maybe you could say that's kind of a perfect storm. Maybe you could say for me at my certain, like my age bracket or something like that, I was old enough to remember Street Fighter 2, so to speak, to play it as a little kid in the arcades. And so I have that sort of like fundamental and maybe love for old school fighting games. But then once I started becoming like a adolescent, you know what I mean? I actually had my own systems. And you think like Street Fighter Alpha was the first game that had like a fucking training mode in it. So sometimes I would, get to play that on Sega Saturn, that kind of thing. And, I grew up then when I actually had the ability then maybe buy myself, if I could, something like a Dreamcast or whatever it is. And, the point is maybe I was that perfect storm of a kid. I didn't really get to play a lot of Street Fighter, but I grew up during that age where you had to be able to look at things and to be able to analyze things because you were not going to get many opportunities to play. And then as I became an adolescent, you know what I mean? And I actually got to play a little bit more, you know what I mean? I got to apply that sort of the way my brain worked. And I got to be, let's say, creative because a lot of people just then weren't playing fighting games the same way. The only people that were still playing were people that maybe were really more into the scene. And that's something too that people don't want to admit, that a lot of the players that were considered good back then are still considered good now. The players that are like, oh, Clayton would never win nowadays. Oh, wow. You mean these players that were playing back when I was playing and I was beating them? Give me a fucking break, right? But, it's ridiculous. But you think about that, like imagine what I would have been able to do in like today's day and age, right? Today's day and age where you can go online and go on Fightcade. I think you only have Fightcade right now, right? I guess you don't have Supercade or GGPO. So whatever the case, I was going to say those, but I guess it's only Fightcade now, right? I think. But Fightcade, whatever kind of online thing, you know what I mean? You can play anybody. You don't have to wait. You have training modes. You can play all this kind of stuff. Like I said, people think, I was never a person that was playing that many video games. Now, definitely I played a lot of RPGs, and I think you could say that's probably, a sort of escapism from reality because of the situations that I've been in life, You know what I mean? I really lost myself. I think about, Jesus Christ, people don't even remember, fucking once Reload came out in what, 2003, 2004, you know what I mean? I never was fucking practicing. I was playing all RPGs, just not even, I was like, again, I always think about that. And I think, man, that was, I wasted a lot of my life even doing that. Maybe I had fun playing RPGs, but, I was like, life was just going downhill and downhill, and I didn't know what to do with health wise. And then eventually 2008 rolled around. It's like, yep, you're going to die. Goodbye. But I'm just saying, like, imagine someone, if I had today's day and age, the ability to play games now, the ability to watch a game whenever I want to, the ability to turn on the computer, right? Imagine if I didn't have any fucking health problems, right? But so that's what I'm getting at. You know what I mean? I think that games have progressed, and I've always said, but a lot of new school players are, they find that sort of tactic, whatever, that sort of shenanigan, you know what I mean? They try to learn that thing, but they never got like the fundamentals. Maybe from a certain perspective, I guess you could say the other side of the coin is maybe, Clayton, maybe you wouldn't have that sort of raw skill that you have now in today's day and age, because you would not have had to use your brain to be able to analyze a game, because it's so anywhere I could always get the information whatsoever. Maybe I would have never had to train my brain to be able to look at a game without playing and to accurately be able to call how it's going to work every time, year after year after year, right? So that would be like the negative perspective. You could say, well, Clayton, you know what I mean? You say that, but what about maybe there's a negative perspective that if you had today's day and age with everything so easily, you would have never had to train your brain to be able to look at a game like the way you can now. So that you could say that's an argument, perhaps, right? But we'll not say that for sake of the video, even though I just said it. I mean, who knows, right? Never say never. But again, that's why I think that, generally I would say players have no reason. They have no excuse to be bad at a game, right? Other than themselves. And sometimes an excuse can be real, right? I can't help that my body is shitting on me. I'm sick. That sucks, but that's me, right? You know what I mean? What are you going to do? But generally speaking, again, I don't consider new school players better than old school players. I consider old school players better at simple things, while new school players are, I feel like they have the more kind of, they learned the one tactic, I've used the option select, we didn't call things option selects back in the day, just wasn't the verbiage. But, there's certainly certain, and I'll show this in another video too, that some people say this is a complicated thing, but certain complicated things that people think is complicated back in the day were simple. Certain things that were considered complicated and hard not back then are now considered simple. So it's kind of a give and take for certain things. But anyway, I was making that video because I was thinking about that mic conversation and the conversation in the comments. And again, people nowadays have no idea that a person nowadays says they don't play video games, but they play more video games than, people even played back in the day. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. People have no idea how much more they play video games now than people did years ago. You know what I mean? So you don't have an excuse. Your excuse isn't even real, right? But I guess you can go look at the comments that I did when we were talking about the mic situation. And that's why I was talking about that. But anyway, remember, if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. The end.